Good morning. At least it is here in Switzerland. This is a short review of the second week of the course and also some comments about the third week. Okay, so one of the interesting things was at the start of the week, some of the posts that we had in the coffee corner about, first of all, that showed us a little bit about where you were, and secondly, it talked about some issues that there were. Three common ones that came up, which all offer opportunities for CAS to do with the use of plastic and its distribution and dispersal, and particularly the number of plastic bags that are used. The second one was really about ageing populations, and this is an issue not just for richer countries like Japan, Switzerland, the United States, but also for emerging countries like China and India. And that, of course, is going to present some really big CAS opportunities, particularly a trend that we're seeing in the richer world is where the families are taking less and less responsibility for people as they're aging. So those were a couple of the interesting points that I picked up, which I think affect pretty much everyone wherever we are. The other thing which I would say, which is certainly true of richer countries, is where students see service sometimes as being a little bit of checkbook service. So if we raise some money, give them to an organisation that's doing good things, our conscience is solved, we've done the right thing. And really we want, to quote an old friend of mine, to get the kids' minds and hands dirty. In other words, to get them thinking and out of their comfort zone. Okay, moving on to the posts themselves. A lot of you saw very well the connections between the learning outcomes and the learner profile, which is not surprising because the learning outcomes were derived from the learner profile. And you're also able to make some good connections to both the approaches to learning and the approaches to teaching. In terms of using the CAS stages and planning for the CAS activity of your dreams, there were some great ideas that came up. We had a hiking club, which was very much action, and that dealt with also some important skills that go along with that. We then had a couple of suggestions about making videos for new students coming into the DP, which is a good idea, although I think perhaps people underestimated how much time that would take. And we also had a fantastic idea about a food kitchen or pantry, which students could be involved in. I thought that was really good. And also some stuff about working with an orphanage. In all of those things, the preparation seemed very thorough, and perhaps there were a couple of things where we need to consider some of the issues that might be involved. I think particularly sometimes it's really important to consider where we might need professional support in terms of a counsellor or psychologist when kids are working with people. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me as a CAS coordinator. I had a group of students that were working with mentally handicapped people in a garden, and they were there working for 2 weeks in the summer holidays. And during that time, one of the people that were in the residence came up and started asking the kids questions about how to commit suicide. Now, that of course shocked them, and they did the right thing. First of all, they consulted with the counsellor that was, and he had a session with them talking about that. Apparently this guy, whenever he saw someone new, that was the first question he asked them. But he'd been asking the same question for the last 20 years. But as you can imagine, to 18-year-olds, it was a bit of a shock. So having that support is in place is really good, and it was one of the conditions of the kids actually working with this particular institution. And I think that there were some, as I said, some great ideas about this, and you could use these ideas that you came up with and the posts that you have as exemplars for the kids about how they could go about planning what they're doing. I felt just about all the suggestions I've read could also have been CAS projects because of the length of time and the depth of preparation that was involved. Then we have the CAS quiz. Okay, as I said to you last week, this is something you shouldn't, the results of which you shouldn't take too seriously. It's not a pass or fail in the course, and it is one person's interpretation of a number of situations about CAS. And I've got a few comments about how we decide whether something is CAS or not. The first thing to look at is the proposal of the individual student going to fit one of the definitions of CA or S? Second point is, if that's good, is this a challenge for the students concerned or student concerned? What learning outcomes are going to be achieved, or what learner profile attributes are going to be developed through it? Is the activity itself ethical? I mean, have they considered the impact it has not only on themselves, but also on other people? Is it part of the requirements for their diploma course? Because if it is, it can't be CAS. Obviously, with things like service, if students are being paid, well, then it's not really service. The things which cause the most concern are probably activities related to religion and political involvement. So it's very difficult to be dogmatic about this. And this is one of the things I think to be very careful about in investigating the context. One of the things that we need to consider is that the IB itself is a humanist organisation. And as a consequence, it's not really into proselytising a particular religion. So you need to think about what that word means, and is the activity really going to be promoting that religion? In terms of political involvement, one of the big questions for me is, first of all, does the political group promote the mission of the IB? Or, for example, it could be something that's very racist in its approach, and that wouldn't be appropriate. So that's a question. The second issue would be really about the safety of the student involved. And, that's a serious consideration in any other country that we live in. And lastly, I'd say having considered these aspects, there are two key things you need to remember. One is the context that you're actually operating in. And the second one is the individual student. Okay, so that's a few thoughts about week 2. Now, in terms of week 3, we're moving on to look at the idea of reflection. And to start with, you'll get a look at some sample CAS reflections. You'll be aware, if you've been onto YouTube, that there are lots of CAS reflections on YouTube. So apart from these written ones, you could also have a look at those. That's the first learning outcome, and it involves groups, which I'll post in the announcements. The second second learning engagement looks at how do we develop reflection. And the third one is really about CAS projects. Now, some of you in week 2 proposed things which could actually have been CAS projects. And the last last learning engagement is about working with others. Now, the link, which is in the module slides, doesn't work, but you will find the resource working with others in the resource library. Good luck for this week, and I look forward to reading your posts. Goodbye.